All right, Scott and Larry, you guys created American Crime Story for FX, the first installment of which was The People versus O.J. Simpson, based on this famous murder trial that brought up so many questions about race and the criminal justice system and celebrity and 24-hour news cycle. All these things are now back in the forefront since this show came on. When you guys were making it, did you realize it was going to have this big of an impact?
I don't think we knew, how much attention it would get. I mean, I think the reason we decided to do it and do it now was that we felt that the more we looked at that case, the more it had, more we saw that it had a lot to say about things today. You know, for all those things you mentioned, the birth of the 24-hour news cycle, the idea of a celebrity culture. There was just so many things that it seemed so much more than a murder trial. But that murder trial was always underneath it. So you always had to keep, make sure that you were treated that very serious and very real. But there were all these other issues, gender politics, all that kind of stuff that we felt like, wow, no one's really looked at the O.J. Simpson case like this and took it all in.
Yeah, I mean, just recreating the trial for the sake of recreating the trial wasn't interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, anytime we do one of our biopics, we always look for what's that bigger idea that we find fascinating that we're going to want to commit a year or 2 or 3 years of our lives to. Like Larry's saying, OJ had so many issues on the surface and issues under the surface that we could explore, and with the 10 hours, we could really dig.
Right, that's key right there, is the 10 hours. We'd never done television before, and so we were sort of really good at taking someone's life and turning it into a 2-hour structure. But the O.J. Simpson case, there's no way you could do the 2-hour version. You could do a 2-hour version, but it would just be greatest hits. It would just be kind of stuff you already knew. And we felt like, wow, it's what made us get into television, to have this big canvas to take, weekly by week, just examining these different themes and having a real discussion about them.
Mm-hmm. You guys brought up the fact that you're known for your biopics. Let me just read off some of your famous credits. Ed Wood, People versus Larry Flint, Man on the Moon. You just did Big Eyes, which reunited you with Tim Burton. You guys have written non-biopics before, but I'm curious, what is it that attracts you to adapting true stories for the screen?
I mean, the first one, Ed Wood, we ended up writing because we found ourselves identifying with Ed Wood. It's like we like to say, nobody sets out to make a bad movie, it just happens. And we really had a lot of fun on that project, gathering up all the data about all these eccentric people. And then the script got out there and it was really well received, and Tim said he would direct it. And the movie was such a mix of tones that we found interesting, and that it had a lot of sadness to it, it had a lot of tragedy, it had a lot of weirdness, it had big jokes, it had interesting time period, which we love. It had all these goodies for us, and nobody really objected to that mix. and we found it very rewarding.
Right.
And so the minute that script was well received, people said, "You got any more of these?" And we said, well, in college, we always talked about how Larry Flint's life was really interesting. And then, a minute later, we had sold that as a pitch. And it sort of set us on this path of being able to write these movies that we found really interesting. Studios tend to be a lot more hands-off with these projects. It's hard to second guess them. They are what they are. We bring our tone to it, but no one's going to give us notes saying, "Well, can you change the third act?" Or can you have him not put on a dress? That just we're sort of bulletproof with a lot of the weirdness, and then I don't think we've ever been replaced on a biopic as writers, because there's so much digging you have to do and so much homework that by the time you've got to the end of a draft, if a studio doesn't want to make it, they're just going to give up.
Right. I mean, I think that's very important. Is that on the OJ show, we're producers, we're also producers of Big Eyes. But what happened with us is that when we started doing these true life stories, we were really being treated like producers, even when we weren't producers. We were involved in decision making, at the micro and macro level. We're just, you know, costume designers or set designers would come to us because we'd have pictures of Tor Johnson's house, or we knew what Andy Kaufman's, you know, stuff looked like back in Great Neck. So it allowed us to be much more involved with the process, and it also allowed us to work with really interesting material. I mean, as our careers went on, the studios became much more conservative about the kind of movies they made. But for some reason, a crazy true life story, you're still able to kind of push through the system, which, you know, a lot of it's the whole thing, Truth is Stranger Than Fiction. It's almost, we found it almost easier to get a movie, you know, as strange as, you know, Autofocus, which we produced. And that's a really bizarre film, but we got it made fairly easily because they, you know, the hunger for true life stories or interesting true life stories is out there.
So now this is certainly an interesting true life story, and it's a true life story that I think before this miniseries came on, everybody thought they knew everything there was to know about it. So if you could talk a bit more about your research, number one, and number two, how you found all these different themes, you know, socioeconomic, race, gender, all these different things that are underneath the surface of this trial, and putting those into your story.
I mean, jumping into it right off the bat, we read Jeff Toobin's fantastic book, and Jeff has a love for the weird detail that we do. It was just a lot of strange, interesting material about the backstage lives of these people, and we really just started to get a feel for Marcia Clark, the person. You know, not the shrill woman with the bad haircut being made fun of on the Tonight Show, but the struggling mom with 2 kids and a divorce in progress and an ex-husband she isn't getting along with, and you know, Johnny Cochran as the guy beyond the peacock, this guy beyond the flashy suits, you know, the guy who had a mistress, the guy who had 30 years of legitimate fighting for civil rights in Los Angeles, fighting as hard as he could to the end of the road, but now he's getting made, and looking for that way of sort of showing the world these problems that were so important to him. Once these people started to come to life to us as more than those flat images, you know, we'd all seen on court TV, and we became really excited about it. And then we started talking about the show, and then this is where Larry and I spent a lot of time talking about the themes we were all finding really interesting. And the idea is that, wow, the 24-hour news cycle, it sort of started around the time of the OJ trial. Right. Wow, celebrity journalism seemed to start around the time of the OJ trial. Wow, gender politics were a lot different 20 years ago. Wow, race in America really hasn't changed from 20 years ago. And these were all interesting points. And the more we talk, and then we stumble across ideas I don't think I'd ever thought about. I was particularly intrigued by the difference between the private lawyers and the public lawyers, and that the prosecutors have a lot less money to work with. They work longer hours. They have fewer worker bees. Marcia's taking her homework home with her every night. Bob Shapiro's not. Bob Shapiro's going out to dinner at Spago, where he's going to a movie premiere. He has more cash to work with, and he has more assets to work with. And we started talking about, well, how much harder is it when you're on the public side as opposed to on the well-paid defense side? And this was a million and one issues that we thought, wow, 10 hours is going to be great.
And in terms of the research, Jeff Toobin's book was our main source, but the crazy thing about the O.J. Simpson trial is that literally every single person involved wrote at least one book, sometimes 2 books. Cousins wrote books, jurors wrote books, and on top of all that, there are
O.J.'s niece wrote a book.
O.J. Yeah, it's insane. I'm still occasionally somehow find a new book, but then there's also all the trial transcripts. There's all the YouTube footage of every night these people appeared on Larry King's show, and so we started just diving in deep, and because initially FX were treating us they were very supportive, and they sort of gave us as much time as we wanted. we took a lot of time. We probably took much more time than you were supposed to on a television show. But we just really got into these characters and these people, and because we had 10 hours, we could tell it from all these different points of views, and we started discovering that people could have contradictory views. You could, we didn't have to pick a narrative or a side. We could show it from everybody's point of view. We started comparing it to, say, the Robert Altman movies of the 1970s, where something like Nashville, you're looking at, every character in Nashville thinks they're the star of that movie, and they all have their own dramatic things going on. So even someone like Dominic Dunn, who comes in much later to our thing, we treated those characters as important things. Dominic Dunn book is fantastic. He is one of my favorite books on the O.J. Simpson trial.
Yeah, that a lot of the characters were talking about storytelling.
Yes.
And the show, the show's got a lot of ideas to it, but the biggest one might be just the idea of creating a narrative.
Yeah.
And obviously the defense was better at telling a story than the prosecution. But it became really interesting that you could kind of look at, Marcia and Chris and Johnny and Bob and Leah as putting on a show. Right. And they were each sort of trying to tell their version of what that show was, what that story was for an audience. And everyone knew that audience was more than those 12 people in the jury box. That audience was the world.
Yeah, strangely, I think it almost at times felt autobiographical for us, because that's what we do. We're always taking something that really happened and try to figuring out a way to make a narrative out of it that can other people can understand. And so, strange enough, I think it surprised us when so much of the show became actually about that, about people looking at something that happened and how do you tell this story? How do you tell this story to be most effective?
Yeah, and like they were saying about FX, you got to give them a lot of props because they gave us so much time. I mean, nobody was calling us up saying, "Where is it?" And so we spent a full year just doing our initial outline and writing the pilot,
right? Which
I think was really valuable to make the show so dense, because we could just pack in so many ideas, and if we had just cranked out that outline in 6 weeks, it wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, no, because if you go back to our original outline that we showed Fox, I mean, it's all 10 episodes are pretty much laid out. They obviously got filled in a great deal, but we knew what we wanted to say.
Mm-hmm. So speaking of the network, at what point did Ryan Murphy come on? Obviously, he's got a relationship with FX. What point did he come on, and what did he add to the show that really helped push it over that edge?
I mean, he came on about a year and a half in.
Yeah. Because initially we were going to be at Big Fox.
Yeah.
And it was going to be just a miniseries based on itself. So we had written at least the first 2 episodes.
Well, yeah, we wrote episodes 1 and 2. We had an outline. We had a 6-week writer's room. Out of that writer's room, episodes 3, 4, and 5, and some of 6.
Yeah, and a much larger Bible. We created a much larger Bible out of that room, and
that's when Ryan came on. So that was like fall of whatever year it was, fall of 2014.
Right. I mean, we had we were getting so much positive feedback from the Fox organization. What Ryan did when he brought in was the idea that this could be a continuing thing, and also he brought in almost this instant. The gates were open there in terms of like let's make this thing now. Let's start casting right away, and all these actors were just dying to work at Ryan Murphy, and so and once you've got someone like Cuba and then Travolta fell in, it sort of like it became this kind of this snowball where the cast started happening, and the show really came together.
Yeah, I was going to say the cast is really phenomenal in this. I mean, not only do they look like the people that they're playing, but they really embody, they embody them in such a great way. I mean, not just Cuba and John Travolta, but Sarah Paulson and Courtney B. Vance and Sterling K. Brown, just like on down the line. David Schwimmer as Rob Kardashian.
Great cast.
Yeah. We were nervous. Everyone was a little nervous at a certain point, thinking like, were we casting too many celebrities? Was it becoming? Ryan used to make a joke like, "Is this the Love Boat?" And we'd be like, "Love Boat." It's a
it's a fine line if you cross it, then you're in Love Boat territory.
Right.
So you have to stay just on the other side.
Right. That's one of the great things about Sterling K. Brown is that he certainly wasn't an unknown, but he wasn't like these other guys, and he's so great as Chris Darden. Also, the thing is, going back to my earlier point about how the Robert Altman of it all, everyone in the O.J. Simpson case, Faye Resnick, she thought she was in the middle of the Faye Resnick show. So it's perfect that you get someone like Connie Britton to play Faye Resnick, you know. So all these people, like the spotlight was on them. So it sort of helped that you had movie stars playing them.
Yeah, I mean, there were lots of amusing stories in Jeff's book. After Shapiro and Cochran started to sort of try to strangle each other and take charge of the defense team, where they would run off and have competing press conferences.
Yes.
Which we thought was really funny. Shapiro would run one direction, Johnny would run the other direction. Who can get the local TV crews first? And so that really plays the idea that everyone is a star in their own mind.
What's funny is there's a scene that got cut out, but when Bill Hodgman has his heart problems in episode 5 and collapses in the courtroom.
Oh yeah.
We actually began after the commercial break in the script with the doctor who was treating him actually had his own press conference, and we had Dominic Dunn say, "Jesus, this is like a case where the doctors of the lawyers have their own press conferences."
Yeah. So you guys are coming back for season 2 of American Crime Story, and this one's going to center on Katrina. I'm just curious, what made you guys decide to shift? It's not what I think you would expect,
Right.
you know. So what made you guys settle on that for your next season?
We're producers on the show. We're not actually writing season 2.
Oh, okay, I see.
I do think that it was the.
I mean, Katrina's all right.
Yeah, and it is the thought behind it is that to try to expand what the idea of American crime is. And what's really funny, the success of the OJ show has led to every single other network to do John Benet Ramsey and all these. There's every single major case of the 80s. It sort of looks like it's going to have its own little miniseries. That I actually think that us doing something outside of the box like Katrina and examining how this catastrophe and how it all affects the city might actually make us stand out once again.
Mm-hmm. So we're right in the middle of Emmy season, and you guys have won a Golden Globe for People versus Larry Flint, which also got a prize at the Writers Guild. You were nominated for another Writers Guild for Ed Wood, and this is, being thought to be a big Emmy contender, knock on wood. What does that kind of recognition mean for you guys?
We're writing very unconventional stories in terms of, and it's so just nice to get the acknowledgement, that was so nice about this show, particularly that a lot of our films have been very, talked about and awards, whatever. Ed Wood won a couple of Academy Awards. We've always had a lot of attention to our things, but we've never had this center of the zeitgeist, which sort of the O.J. Simpson show did. And, certainly we've never done television for it to have to be sort of embraced by the television community the way we have been. And hopefully with the Emmys, it feels great.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and it's been very satisfying because we didn't know what we were doing, and we weren't trying to fit into anyone's opinion of what this television show should look like and what the tone should be. And we have a vibe that we like, and we like I said, we like to mix up the seriousness and the comedy and the social observation. And when the scripts came in, Fox and FX were totally supportive, and then the audiences and the critics really seemed to appreciate that. And I don't know if it looks like anything else on TV, but I'm glad people dug it.
Also, the real satisfying thing is that the level of discourse. I feel like people are not just talking about the soap opera elements. People really did appreciate the issues of race and gender that we're talking about. And so, we're new to television, so we didn't really know about these recaps and this sort of Twitter thing that happens every week. And just to see people actually really discussing these issues and looking at the case from a new perspective and giving sort of dignity back to some of these characters like Chris Darden and Marsha Clark that had, you know, you can see on the real Marsha Clark's face these days where she seems relieved that people aren't just coming over to her and blaming her for losing the trial anymore.
Yeah.
That people sort of, you know, are sympathetic to what she went through. That was a big deal for us.
Yeah, all those Wednesday morning recaps were they were so much fun for us, but they were so rewarding because it wasn't. It's like sometimes you see lazy reviews, and lazy reviews are just, this is the plot, and I give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down. I mean, every Wednesday morning were these really thoughtful essays about the show and the ideas of the show, and then that's not something you get every day. So it was really nice.
Yeah, we got people talking again, which is really interesting.
Yeah, it is amazing that this 20-year-old case is back in the news again. I mean, not only was this show, but you know, there's this new ESPN documentary about O.J.'s life, but it's interesting watching these two side by side. You know, because they kind of complement each other in a lot of ways and give you a lot of insight into the trial and to all the issues that it raises.
Yeah, no, it was interesting to watch the documentary because I wouldn't say I was nervous, but I was worried that there would be more overlap than there actually is. And you said the word complementary. I actually feel they are very complementary. That you know, particularly say the first couple hours of the documentary and the last couple hours of the documentary, which covers areas that our show does not. And I thought those really were really fascinating stuff.
Well, thank you both so much, and congratulations on the show. It was a real pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. I like your Wolf of Wall Street poster behind you. That's
oh, thank you. Yeah, I like your posters behind you too. Although
no, that's good.
well, have a great day. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.